Hello, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to GP Bullhound's Tech Predictions for 2025. I'm Callum Stewart, a member of the investment team here and one of the authors of the report. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Per Roman, founder and managing partner of GP Bullhound, and Alec Daffener, partner and head of our US advisory business, who will be taking us through some of these key predictions for this year. Thank you both for taking the time to join me from your warmer climates than cold, snowy London. How are we both doing today?
Good. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Callum.
Perfect. Thanks for joining. So we've been releasing these predictions since 2007, and our accuracy is quite astonishing. I think it's something like a 90% hit rate. I'm just going to share my screen here so that we can have a look at some of the previous predictions that we actually made. Per, what do you think it is about the organization that lends itself to being able to spot a lot of these key trends before they come out?
Well, Callum, we started the business back in '99. Bunch of really technology interested geeks. We are a much larger organization now, but I still think we're a bunch of technology focused geeks. So I think by always kind of working on the frontier of new technology, and I would say software technology in particular, we can gaze into at least the near future with pretty good predictability. Behind that, all the professionals at GP Bullhound, what do they do? And when they spend all day and most of their nights with scale up, startups, growth stage companies that are at these frontiers. So in then I think we just need to put the dots together and pick the key themes out of that. Inevitably this is going to get a lot easier, because maybe next year, instead of seeing Alec and me, you will see an AI present what's coming straight out of our Slack sphere and so forth.
I think that leads perfectly into what sums it up here is a financially focused firm, or in the financial sector, predicting the AI breakout before the rise of digital banking. I think that really speaks to sort of the breadth of technologists we have here.
That's right.
So,
and one
sorry,
thing,
Alec.
Callum, I would add is just, we canvassed the entire team globally at GP Bullhound when putting together these predictions. So, with over 120 team members around the world, it really gives us great insight into what we're seeing in different geographies and being on the front lines.
No, that's great. And I guess the first thing to do is to look at how we did last year. I think Sam Altman described last year as the most interesting year in human history, except for all future years. So I think we have here our predictions from the last one. We saw a lot of them come to fruition, Alec, but is there any you were particularly proud of? Any you maybe thought were controversial at the time?
Yeah, I think two that I would highlight on the positive side, on the private sector spearheading space revitalization. I think when you look at what's happening with SpaceX, and also we GP Bullhound made an investment in Leo Labs last year, so that's one we're quite proud of. I think on the semiconductor side, we predicted that the AI race will escalate the semiconductor shortage. I think what we're seeing with NVIDIA chips in particular and what's happened with that stock, that confirms that. Very proud of that prediction. I think on the controversial side, one that we actually got wrong, but one that we're always trying to be on the front edge of predictions, is Apple's subscription service launching an ad-free search engine. I think the idea still makes sense, but maybe we're a few years early for that. So I think we'll see.
The mood music feels right there still, with sort of the Google antitrust things and Apple's move, shall we say, into more the intelligence side, which may be an alternative to search, I think, long term.
Yeah.
And I think also worth pointing out the very first theme, which is around the size and speed of LLMs. even in our most positive mindset, as we were discussing this the same time last year, I don't think we could fully imagine how incredibly fast improvements would come on stream. I mean, the experience we have out of any LLM foundational model right now is just a world difference from only September, let alone a year ago. And I see no reason why this will not continue to scale or even hyperscale. So I think that, back to the Sam comment, I think we are in a very transformational period, not just in our industry, but as a civilization as a whole.
I think you're completely right there, Per. We are in the exponential function right now. Improvements on both getting things smaller and then also power at the thought end of the models is definitely accelerating. So let's dive into our top 3 predictions from this year. So the further predictions we'll give an overview at the end, but they can be found in our report. But these are the 3 ones we wanted to highlight today. So the first, multimodal AI reshapes industries and redefines human technology collaboration. Per, do you think what do you think will be the first sort of real business use cases for this outside of maybe purely technology focused people?
Well, I think this is just following the crumb trails. I mean, we're still in a chat GPT or NLP environment. We're still in a kind of a DOS prompt world right now, where it's super fast, it's super relevant, is often correct, but it only gets delivered as text. I think we humans have a penchant for more than text. This means kind of hooking this up into graphical creation engines and video creation engines and voice creation engines. I think we all know that this is in play at the moment. There's none of the major companies in the space not actively working on this. So I think we're going to see some tremendously interesting experiences being launched to enterprise and consumer during 2025. And I think for maybe the citizen at large, they're going to be quite wowed by what's coming down the pipe, really.
And I think you've sort of got to my next point quite quickly there. We've only just got used to the phone being almost an extension of our arm or our body. Do you think the technology is moving faster than most people's understanding of how to interact with it?
Yeah, I think technology or innovation moves in very asymmetric waves. So you have long periods where actually not very much innovation happens, and it's quite a controlled environment, and it's frustrating. And then you have short periods of massive innovation. I mean, we saw that in 2007 with the App Store wresting the control of mobile away from operators, as an example of that, or the PC revolution in the 80s. And I think we're in such a storm at the moment. And I think the only deterrent to the acceleration of that storm now will be regulatory hurdles. So I think those countries in the world that are willing to take an open stance and have a reasonable or low degree of regulation will come out as big winners in what's going to be ultimately a globally politically important game.
And maybe that's a very good point, that Facebook recently changing its content moderation or sort of what it allows on its platform. Do you think that, how, maybe Alec, you could answer this as well, being based over there, how important does the ethics and trust component become when there's the power to generate such convincing and pass so much data in these multimodal models?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly ethical questions that we need to consider. And when you think about relying on an AI system or a model that's ingesting data from various sources, and the reliability of that data sometimes is questionable. There needs to be a screen or some type of moderation engine or something on top of that. And so I think it's something we need to continue to watch. And it's certainly a focus, I think, in the market.
Yeah, I would also, Callum, I would also separate trust and ethics because I think trust is fundamental here, right? And there's going to be a sliding scale. If we have an AI-based robot doing heart surgery on you, you're going to ask for a very, very high degree of trust. But if you have an AI choosing your Netflix content, you don't mind a little bit of hallucination. So I think it's horses for courses on that. I think the ethics is a much more tricky question because it's also subjective. What is ethical in one place or in one person's mind may not be ethical in another person's mind. I don't really think that's a technology question, or it's more like a society question, and we're going to see that play out, I think, quite differently between regions of the world, and that in itself is going to be quite interesting to track. But I think for the technology industry, we want to deliver the platform to make it available, and then I think humanity, as per its history, tend to make both good and bad choices, and we have to continue to believe that net good wins over time.
Yeah, and I think maybe the ethical side or regulation side needs to take a leaf out of the startup world and fail fast, find things that maybe work or don't work, and then move on from there. So that sort of gives an overview of the first prediction, and we'll move on to the second one. Still, AI dominates a lot of the thought, and our second prediction is agentic AI advances in niche use cases while broad implementation lags. So we're not quite saying here that this is the end of the human workforce, but Alec, do you think we'll be working in the same way as we are now by the end of this year?
Well, I think we're already seeing some implementations of agentic AI. I mean, I think probably if you look at, supply chain, healthcare, there's some controversy going on right now with regard to the healthcare insurance market and how the use of AI in terms of responding to claims, that are made by insured are being handled, and there's some political discussions going on right now. So I think we're already seeing the implementation, but we're already starting to see some political backlash there. I think the challenge is, just in terms of scalability, there's caution, from the enterprise side, the nascency of the tech. So these are all kind of real world, constraints. I think by the end of this year, we will see progress, but I think we're still probably 2 to 3 years away from, very meaningful implementation of agentic AI in kind of the broader business landscape.
No, that's a really good point. And maybe Per, you could sort of, I know as a global institution at GP Bullhound, we're trying to bring in our own sort of AI agentic flows. What are the limitations maybe you've seen as we've tried to bring those in, and what are the areas that you've actually seen real wins there?
Yeah, well, I think in a way you can create scales here between, let's say, fast thinking and slow thinking, and high value versus high volume. I mean, there's a lot of processing the world is doing manually today that is low value, high volume, where I think agentic could move in and actually replace, to everybody's happiness. I mean, this is reducing quite boring work for humans, to be honest, releasing more room for creativity. Then we have high impact decisions where I think, at least for a good while, we're going to see more of a cobot environment between humans and computers. Then the other aspect is speed, right? So you could, in a rare situation, have a high impact but very low tolerance for time to decide situation where you want to go agentic faster. Imagine you are a military vessel being attacked by a drone swarm. You may not have the time to ask a human what to do. And I think in that case, survival instinct will dictate when you feel better about giving that to an AI to decide to defend you, rather than take the risk of waiting for a human to decide. And I think these are really, really important decisions that are being discussed you know, across the globe at the moment.
No, that's a very good insight on that of when to use humans and when to push harder on actually developing the AI further. I think with a lot of noise has been made recently with how this agentic AI seems to have found, and maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, a natural ally in crypto. Will we see this as sort of steps that help to bring the underlying ledger technology to bear, or is this, again, still too early to sort of give an estimate of that?
I think that's a rather tricky question in time, right? Because I mean, if with both these topics we're discussing, ultimately we're leading to some form of omnipresent compute, and then whether you compute that on some form of distributed ledger and whatever currency you run on that almost become a secondary discussion. But I think when we make these predictions, we try to be pretty acute about it has to happen in the year we're in, right? I mean, it's so many people are good at predicting what's going to happen at some time in the future. We're going to have autonomous cars. We're going to have omnipresent computing. We're going to have a mobile device without any hardware because it hears and knows what we think. We believe in all of that, but it's very hard to predict exactly when. And I think this project is all about trying to put the finger on what we think is going to happen this particular year. And I wouldn't at least stick my head out and say that we're going to see that merge in 2025.
No, that's a very good point. So I think the summarization here is that the efficiency gains seem high. I think we state that it's been hard for proof of concepts to roll out to more complex and maybe autonomous systems because of this AI agency gap over certain tasks. But as maybe costs come down, as sort of our trust as people working in business becomes higher on these agents, things will start to flow through. Would you agree with that?
And I think there is another side of agentic flow, which is more on the technology side, i.e., what we're facing here is also an unprecedented need for computing power and ultimately energy. I mean, this is going to become a real challenge for planet Earth. How do we fuel these systems that may do so much good for us? And I think one thing we've already seen is that skilled AI engineers have learned that by breaking down what looks to a human as a single task or a single question into many smaller sub-agents makes the total compute, therefore energy consumption, much lower. So I think that's something that's in play already. We're going to see in a much, much bigger way in 2025, because with all respect to the current systems, they're quite brute force in their use of compute.
No, that's great in there. So maybe we'll move on to the last prediction that we're going to talk about here, and this is enabling technologies making quantum practical. So this probably sounds a bit like science fiction to many, quantum. Per, do you want to give a little bit of an insight why there's an excitement about it here?
Yeah, well, I would say when we think about it in the traditional sense of a computer replacing GPUs and CPUs, I do still think it is somewhat science fiction, i.e. that wouldn't fit into a 2025 forecast project like we do here. But I think the engineers that have been working on it for decades, to be honest, have learned a lot about what goes on in the subatomic space. And I think that has opened up some much nearer term opportunities, particularly in quantum sensing. And I could maybe pass back to you, Callum, to explain to the audience what that actually means.
Well, yes, yeah, I thought that might happen. So in the sense that, as Per said, quantum has been, or the effects of quantum have been well understood for a number of years, back when Bohr's law, things like that coming out in the start of the last century. So we understand a lot of the fundamentals, but now our technological advancements, our ability to map or control atoms down to, say, a atomic level is far higher than there had been before. in quantum computing, the issue is that you're having multiples of these so-called qubits operating together, whereas in quantum sensing, you are maybe a more simpler, well-understood system. So the commercial trajectory there is a lot closer to realization. And I think that's what we were trying to suggest here, that those enabling technologies, so those ones that are helping to make those, shall we say, quantum systems a lot more stable, will have a significant impact on value creation in the near term. And do you think there are any parallels to maybe any of the other computing revolutions to help people understand what we mean by enabling technologies? So if you look back to the advent of personal computing or the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we probably should look all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. I think when you have very large paradigm shifts, people get really worried, and the news then stir that up. And I think in the very short term, it is true. I mean, jobs change, and job needs change in society when this comes through. And that does create both new job opportunities, and it does create job loss and need for retraining. And I think we have to expect that this is going to happen over the next decade or so, as this goes from being kind of in the technology industry where it is now into the vertical industries of healthcare, legal, industrial, and whatnot. But if we look at global employment today versus global employment 120 years ago, it hasn't gone down. So I also think humanity in the mid and long term are very good at adapting to every innovation phase that we've been through. And I mean, I'm old enough to have lived through the innovation phases since the PC revolution. And in each of them, the expectation has been, humanity will be out of work. But humanity serves itself, and it always finds new work. So I'm less worried about that. And I think it's more about creating a market environment and a market dynamic where you allow for those shifts to happen as quickly as possible, and for the new ideas and the new entrepreneurs to have as good of an opportunity to build out of that as they can.
No, that's great. And I guess we'll go through the same scare or fear again when quantum computers themselves are powerful enough to do everything that they promise. So I think we'll finish by giving a very brief overview on what's in store across the rest of our predictions. You can find a lot more within the report. Is there any that you particularly want to call out that you think are directly relevant right now, either of you? Alec, we'll start with you.
Well, I would say the number 10 is interesting, and it actually plays on a little bit of the prediction that we had last year with regard to space. And I think this year we're highlighting a bit more of the threats in space demand versus the changes of what's happening with regard to the ability to dramatically reduce the cost of shipping payload into orbit, but that creates challenges, threats, and traffic in space, which I think is quite interesting.
Right, thank you. And Per, any final ones?
Yeah, I mean, I would pick out two things. I think basically the themes 6, 7, and 9 around cybersecurity are all touching on a very important topic, because again, I think every time we've seen step change in technology, we've also seen, let's say, the dark side of the world being just as good, if not better, at adopting these new tools to their own mischievous benefits. So I do think security and trust is going to be very important now. I mean, and this could go from such banal things as, are we really looking at Ariana Grande or Brad Pitt when we see it on Instagram, or is it made up, down to our most important financial institutions potentially being attacked by new cyber weapons that we don't yet have the defenses for. So I would expect large amounts of capital being invested in those companies, and also large amounts of money being invested by corporates to buy these moats. Then probably what I'm more interested in myself, because I love the kind of man-machine interfacing technologies, is I do think after many years of, let's say, quite underwhelming voice experiences, I'm sure we've all at some point tried Apple Siri, and that surely doesn't get anybody excited. And this goes back, you know, to 2+ decades of nuance and etc. technologies. I do think we are really at the cusp where computers will start understanding what we say, even, for instance, with my European American accent. And I think that's going to be opening a door for a whole new set of consumer devices. And that's going to also be quite an interesting game to play out.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. I think also number 4 is quite relevant with the recent sort of announcement from NVIDIA this week. So I think exciting times for 2025, the next most exciting year in human history until the next one. So you can find the rest of the report here, downloaded using the QR code. Really would like to thank Per and Alec for taking the time to join me today. And thank you all for watching.